Hello, I'm Arlyn Hackett, and I am 76 years old. Being 76 years old means I've lived some history. I have some history. And that history gives me a sense of perspective. I rely on it. I depend on remembrances of the past to give me some guidance about what's going on now. Just a few moments ago, I was sitting here having coffee, here at the computer, and listening and watching the news. Today's news is much like it's been for several days. I'd say it's about outrage. People are outraged that the pandemic continues. They're outraged that there's mandates for vaccinations, outraged because of mandates for wearing masks. And of course, this week, people are outraged about the war that we apparently lost, or how people feel about that, the war in Afghanistan. People are outraged that we suffered so from hurricanes and they seem to only be getting worse. We don't know if that means climate change or what. And then there's the outrage about the investigation of the insurrection. It gives us fear, a sense of what really went on. So I'm going to share with you some memories that I have from my past that give me a sense of dealing with all of this. I can remember getting the polio shot, and I can remember before there was a vaccine for that. Well, I was so happy when I got vaccinated because then I could go swimming because all the swimming pools had been closed. My mother was a very health-conscious person, and she wanted to make sure that all of her kids were vaccinated against everything. And in my career, I have been in healthcare, I've been in education, and the longest period, I was in the culinary field. I cannot imagine doing all of those things if it hadn't have been for the fact that I was vaccinated against certain very serious diseases. Against polio, of course, but also one of the most important for me was tetanus. It's a very serious disease when you're a chef. Also, another very serious disease for the vaccination was hepatitis. And so that to me just made common sense that I would have those vaccinations. Now, I realize that there are other people around that feel differently. So I got to tell you, I remember the first time that we heard about cigarette smoking causing cancer. I really didn't want to believe it. I didn't believe it. Well, of course, 40 years later, when I've had 4 different gum surgeries caused by cigarette smoking, and I quit smoking after only having smoked 10 years. So yes, I know about those kind of warnings. But I remember the most angering for people was when they learned that secondhand smoke was more dangerous than actually smoking, and restaurants and bars and public places started not allowing people there that were smoking. It made sense, and especially when we think about things like helmets for motorcycle riders, seat belts for people in cars, life jackets for people riding in speedboats. I guess for me and my bringing up from how my parents raised me is there was something about what we call common sense. And the common sense is that we protect ourselves and we protect others. And I have to say I'm really thankful for my family's common sense. The Afghanistan war is colored for my experiences about Vietnam. I think that the experience that I would want to share that is most important to me is that shortly after, quote, the war had ended, I was attending a lecture that was given by an Air Force captain who was retired, and he had been in Vietnam, and he was giving this speech that everybody thought, because he was considered to be a conservative Republican, they thought it was going to be a very pro-Vietnam War speech. But how he began it is, in war, nobody wins. I'll never forget that. And he proceeded to say that you cannot look at a war and not realize how many people get hurt, how many people get killed on all sides. And we must be very careful, he said, about glorifying war, because people don't realize there's other methods of dealing with problems. They forget how to negotiate. They forget how to talk to one another. And that is very important. It had a lasting effect on me. Well, I grew up in Kansas where there were tornadoes. Our family home was hit by a tornado. I think right now I'd rather be hit with a tornado than a hurricane. But nonetheless, it's sometimes hard to realize when climate change is something that can happen slowly over time. You kind of forget about it. You know, it's kind of like here this summer in San Diego. It's been a really mild summer. Today it's cloudy, it's cool, or cool for summer, and very comfortable. But not too far away, we have dangerous fires. And I think that what was the experience that most helped me deal with those kinds of natural disasters actually was when I lived on a farm in Kansas, and we had kind of a mini dust bowl. There was like a 3-week period where we had tremendous dust storms, and we had to take cloths and pieces of cloth and wet them down and seal all the windows and wear masks. It was a lesson in how you survive and how you deal with climate and how you deal with what's going on. That was really very important to me. It was a good lesson. And now, I have to confess, I don't really have any remembrances of insurrection. Oh, I guess you'd say the Watergate years. But the Watergate years were very much defined by one person, and maybe you could say that what happened in Washington, D.C. on January 6th of this year might be kind of defined by one person. But there's an outrage around the country of being devoted to the particular views of Trump, and there's anger. But the means for expressing that anger was dangerous. People were killed, and we have questions about how it was organized and who did it. That's really quite a bit different than Watergate. But what I am really affected by is this sense of outrage. And I'm going to tell you, I have some outrage. And the outrage to me is that we have used now as a political tool for quite a while lying. It really doesn't matter what the truth is. You just lie. You know, somebody says, you did that, and you say, no, I didn't. You just lie about it. And this seems now to be a pattern, and it goes now to both political parties. When you don't want to deal with something, you simply lie. And that's kind of an outrage that I have, but I don't know I have really that much experience with. You know, in teaching, I used to have kids who, would just say, no, I didn't, no, I didn't, no, I didn't. After a while, I thought that was kind of funny, that they could just keep on going, no, I didn't, no, I didn't. It isn't so funny for me now. And yet, I have to say, one of the things about remembrance is you have remembrance of survival. You have remembrance of change. And I've seen a lot of big changes. And I'm confident in change. And so, history for me is a remembrance. History is remembrance. And it keeps me going.